So we're through the border into Mexico. Came through the border at Agua Prieta. Pretty painless actually. Loads of admin as usual, but probably took about 3 hours, just under 3 hours, but pretty good. So we just stopped in that little cafe behind me for a bit of breakfast, and then we're going to shoot off and see what the Mexican roads are like. Well, morning everyone. That was our first day's riding in Mexico yesterday, having got through the border. Uneventful, great, really nice roads actually, some pretty much kamikaze truck driving and driving in general, but just getting used to their sort of rules of the road as it were. So yes, great, we made good progress, got about 200 miles, just under 200 miles away from the border area, which is good because the security there is not very good. We're in the state of Chihuahua, or the region of Chihuahua. And we stayed here in this little motel behind me last night where I think it was pretty safe because it looks like half the local police force decided to stay there as well. So, hey, good security. So we're just heading on south today, further into Chihuahua.
Hola. What's happened to you? Pueden entrar ellos, güey. Yo tengo permiso.
Hi. Hi.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi.
Okay.
What are you looking for?
Aquí, diles que aquí los hospedamos ahí.
Espérate.
Hey.
En here es no, aquí no.
No,
Santa Isabel. Este es Santa Isabel.
¿Qué ves?
In the other way.
That is, yeah.
Yeah, sir. On the looking like that in the river.
Ajá.
Ah, yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay, gracias.
Thank you.
You want to go further out? Yeah.
Okay, yeah, but I don't know if there's a hotel
Oh,
there.
okay, that's
There's the problem. Okay.
So we got caught out a little bit yesterday with distances here in Mexico. We realised sort of at about 4 or 5 o'clock that there were about sort of 3 hours between locations where there was any sort of accommodation. So we had to head down to actually quite a major city called Parral. And we didn't get here till sort of 8:30ish last night, which was a bit late for us. But anyway, we found a motel. That's great. Actually, the city is quite interesting. It was renamed after Mexican independence, and it was renamed after Miguel Hidalgo, who was his father, Miguel, actually, who was a general eventually, and basically is regarded as the father of the country, and led the War of Independence for Mexico. And today we're heading south, looking a sort of target to end up at a city called Torreon, another one of the sort of 4 main cities in Chihuahua. We decided after yesterday's problem with accommodation to sort of have a bit of a target of a place with some accommodation, and looking at the route between here and there, there's not a lot in between. So hopefully we'll make it that far.
Piece of stuff I knew there would be. Cuero?
It's chicharrón.
No? Choosing one.
What's that then?
That's the cuero, yeah?
That's beans and stuff, is it?
Beans.
Prensada?
¿Natural?
Prensada?
¿Una botella?
Muchas gracias. Sí. Gracias. Perfect.
What's that in there?
Gracias. Gracias. So we've ridden over to Torreon and come up to the top of the mountain overlooking the city. It's a pretty big city. I'll swing the camera around in a minute. But behind me you can see the Christos de la Noas statue of Christ, which apparently is the 2nd largest in the world. And swinging the camera around, we can see the city. What a view. Morning everyone. We stayed last night in this beautiful city actually called Zacatecas. We had been heading for a place called Fresnillo, quite a big city, and I was just looking up you know, sort of things to sort of see there, and it's basically stumbled across the fact that it's the most violent city in Mexico, so we thought we'd probably avoid that one. Big narco wars going on apparently. So we diverted slightly to head towards Zacatecas, which seemed a better bet. And actually we stopped at a little cafe for lunch. And although I couldn't understand much of the Spanish, the telly was on and you could see a news report from last night. And they'd actually, or rather the night before, and there'd been a huge gun battle in Fresnillo between the police and I assume the narco gangs following the assassination of a police officer. It was an amazing bit of footage, so pretty good that we avoided that. So yeah, Zacatecas turned out to be an absolute little gem. It's a beautiful city, full of sort of cobbled streets. It's got a lovely cathedral, churches. It's apparently it's very wealthy, historically very wealthy city. It was founded on silver. It had an incredibly rich deposit of silver and then gold they found, and then other minerals and ores as well. And someone estimated that they'd extracted something like in current day values, something like $800 billion worth of ores from the area, and it's still going on a little bit. So yeah, lovely city. We had a really nice look around here last night. Very safe, quite a lot of police presence. We're only about probably 40 or 50 miles from Fresnillo, so still that kind of area. And I think anyone that's watching these videos that is travelling sort of independently and away from the tourist areas in Mexico, it's very much worth, almost on a daily basis, checking your destination and the routes into that destination, because the security environment here changes very quickly. So anyway, we're going to grab a little bit of breakfast and then we're headed for another city called San Luis Potosi, which is further south. So San Luis Potosi, where we stayed last night, turns out to be another lovely city. Similar to Zacatecas, where we were the night before. One of the cities, there are 5 actually in the area, sort of this area of central Mexico, which were founded on the gold and silver boom of the late 16th century. So we went out and had a look around last night and found it to be full of colonial buildings, the centre anyway, colonial buildings and churches and cathedrals. Really lovely place. And so today we're riding to into a state called Querétaro state. Again, central Mexico, but just getting a little bit closer to the Mexico City area. It's in the mountains. It's apparently an important ecological zone called the Sierra Gorda. And we're heading to a town called Jalpan de Sierra, which is a famous area for the Franciscan order. And apparently there are still 2 Franciscan missions there. So we're off there today. Well, we stayed last night in Jalpan de la Sierra, which is a town with actually World Heritage status by UNESCO, because it's one of the 5 Franciscan missions in this area, central Mexico. And behind me is the church, which is I think they call it stucco carving on the front, very ornate, and it's a lovely little town actually. Everything surrounding the mission here. So this morning we're going to go off further into the biodiversity area, as it's called, which on the map looks huge and very hilly with twisty roads. So let's go and see what it's like. So we've been riding for about 4 hours now. It was great to start with, lovely twisties, and then got great. We turned off on a sort of link road between the 2 main roads. Seems to go through a valley, but the navigation seems really inaccurate in this area, and it's physically impossible to stick to the route. So we're kind of going by direction. We've ended up, as you can see, right by a river, having spent the last probably hour in some reasonably challenging off-road bits, and that river is not passable, and there don't seem to be any bridges. So we'll have a bit of a conflab. Pete's gone walking down the river to see if he can find a bridge, but I don't think there is one from the map. So I think we'll probably have to turn around, go back to the last village, which is actually quite hard riding because we did downhill here and we've got to go uphill on the way back, and see if we can work out a route round. Gracias. Okay, so that was actually pretty hard. Pete's got a Garmin, I've got a Google-based mapping system, and neither could get us out of that valley. Kept ending up back at the impassable river, going round and round in circles. So we stopped and asked a builder who obviously didn't speak English, and we don't speak Spanish well enough, but together with sign language and pointing, etc., and this fantastic map that he drew, we managed to get out of it. So map 1, Google and Garmin nil. So it's now we've come out of the very steep valley. It's all sort of dirt tracks, but actually quite pretty if you can take the time to look left and right. We're about, I think, halfway up the other side of the mountain, so hopefully getting somewhere towards Tarmac Road. And we stopped at this little shop behind us just for a bit of a drink. We stayed in this town called Malango last night, up in the mountains, and the name actually comes from the ancient god Molang, or Mola, which was first worshipped here until actually the Christians arrived, knocked the temple down, built what is actually quite a nice church, and converted everyone to Christianity. And that church is now a convent, but it's a lovely town. So we've ridden away from our overnight stop last night, and just stopped for a quick coffee stop for breakfast at this rather cool volcano and lake. I think, if I'm pronouncing it right, it's Alhuhuka volcano. But it's lovely, isn't it? What a lovely spot. And I don't know if you can see up on the ridge just near the kind of mountain in the background, there's some sort of temple there. But what a lovely spot.
Pongo una gotita. Permítame, señor. Señora, acérqueseme. Yo 17, tú quinceañera.
So I've had a lovely ride this morning from our accommodation last night. We've come into the Tabasco region, which is, so we've basically come south, sort of on a horizontal line as it were, with Mexico City. We're pretty much south of that now, although we didn't go into the city. But yeah, we've had a lovely ride, and we've ended up on the coast, on a spit of land with sort of sea at both sides. Nobody about. There are some local sort of habitation, very few people, very, very friendly, all sort of waving and beeping as we go by. But look what we've come to. Absolutely idyllic. It's very Caribbean-esque in feel. Absolutely fantastic. What a lovely place. However, we stopped for a photo, but I've just noticed that our road, I don't know if you can see, stops. So that's a bit novel. We'll have to try and find a way round. What a lovely ride.
Buenos días. El alacrán. Gracias. ¿De 2 kilómetros?
18. Gracias.
Well, morning everyone. We've come to the first of the Mayan temple areas that we want to see. This one's in Conal Calco, which is a relatively little visited temple area. It's apparently virtually the furthest north of the Mayan or the historic Mayan Empire, and it's really well preserved actually. It's a lovely site. And it's quite interesting. It's regarded as a bit of an odyssey in the Mayan world because I don't know if you can see it. Now, you'll probably see from some of the pictures I'll take, but I don't know if you can see behind me. It's the only city where they use bricks to build, which were hewn out of, I think, limestone, as opposed to using limestone itself, which the other cities are all built from. So this site was called, in local language, Joy-Chan. Which means surrounded by heaven. And actually, if you look around and you listen, you've got the jungle surrounding you with all the noises from the jungle, including, unfortunately, the mosquitoes. But what a lovely sight. It's fantastic. So the Mayans were a very sophisticated civilization for their time. They started around, I think, about 2600 BC and were at their height in the sort of 200s AD. But they were very organised, apparently built, I think, about 60 cities in all, and had a single leader per city, and were extremely good, obviously, as you can see, at building, but also at inventing. That was kind of their thing. The Mayas, their sort of area stretches down from here into Guatemala, Honduras, I think part of Belize. So it's a big area. And today the Mayans still exist from a sort of genetic point of view, and they reckon there are about 6 million people who can call themselves Maya. We're off this morning to see another Mayan site at Palenque. This behind me is the accommodation we stayed in last night at Palenque, which is very nice actually, lovely town. Very touristy because Palenque's one of the major and accessible Mayan sites. So we're off, looking forward to seeing it. You'll notice that I am covered, long sleeve, collar, the whole lot, because I got bitten to death yesterday at the other Mayan temple site. So let's see if we can avoid a bit of that today, because it's going to be very, very hot. Yesterday it was about 38 degrees and 94% humidity, so a bit of an effort in the jungle. But looking forward to it. Let's go and see what it's like. So we're at Palenque, the Mayan site. And just reading up on it on the way up here, it was the capital of a really powerful element of the Mayan dynasty, which controlled Chiapas or the modern day Chiapas and Tabasco regions. So very powerful. From here they ruled a large area. Apparently only a relatively small amount of the site, although it looks quite big, has been excavated, and apparently there are lots of buildings and temples still buried under mounds in the jungle, which they're sort of slowly getting around to excavating. So we're going to have a bit more of a look around, but just interestingly, the one behind me at the moment, that big building, is the tomb of the Red Queen. So we're inside the tomb of the Red Queen, and here is the tomb. And apparently that the colouring was fairly obviously perhaps to symbolise blood. Lots of excavation and archaeological work still going on, and behind me they're excavating the Temple of the Sun. Well, it was a great visit, really, really good site. Very informative, very big. Apparently, although the Maya were about from BC, this was about the height of the power of this site was about 600 to 800 AD. Anyway, fantastic. We're going to crack on now and do a bit of riding, and we're heading off to a town about 20 miles this side of the Guatemalan border, because we look at crossing tomorrow morning. So really nice day's ride today. Really nice to see the Mayan temples and some lovely roads afterwards. It's our last night now in Mexico, and we've got a motel relatively near the border, about 20 miles away, so we can do our normal sort of early morning border crossing, just from a security point of view on the other side, so we can get some distance between the border and where we're staying tomorrow night. The border crossing we're doing is called El Cibo, fairly quiet, sort of out of the way one, so hopefully shouldn't be any problems. Reflecting on Mexico, Mexico's been really fantastic. A few things that have struck me that sort of might help people that are going to travel here a little bit off the beaten path. Firstly is size, sheer size of the place. It's enormous. Might sound obvious, but the geographical size coupled with the unreliability of the road quality. So you can look at a map, and one road, for example, it might be white on your map, will look the same as another. One is paved and one is completely off-road. And really, really challenging. So what that means is, because in Mexico the general advice is don't ride after or drive, ride or drive after dark, and definitely don't camp. It means that you've got to know where you're staying. So if you've anticipated doing perhaps 200 miles in a day or 150 miles in a day, that can be wildly out by the time you realise the type of road you're riding on. So it's just a bit of advice to have a contingency. So you might think you're going to have accommodation in X town, but it's not a bad idea just to have a couple of contingencies in case your progress is much, much slower than you thought. But generally, riding through Mexico has been great. People were, warning us about the security situation, which you do have to be mindful of. It's generally been fine. There's a little edge in some places, and you just have to be a little bit careful. And you definitely need to keep tabs on the news to see, because cartel problems really do flare up very, very quickly, and towns are shut down, and there are gun battles and all sorts of strange things that we've had to avoid. But generally speaking, the people, although that little edge and a little hesitancy of interacting with you initially, once you're interacting, extremely friendly, very, very helpful. It's been fantastic. And the scenery, the topography, the general sights and sounds have been absolutely fantastic. We've loved it. So that's our time in Mexico, and tomorrow we're off to Guatemala.
Panzercito.